Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're tackling, well, what I think is one of the most satisfying explanations in physics, actually. It comes straight from Richard Feynman from his lectures.
Ah, yes, chapter 31.
Exactly. We're diving deep into his explanation for the index of refraction. The basic question. Light speed, t dollars, it's supposed to be constant, right? The ultimate speed limit.
Right, in a vacuum. That's the key.
So why does light seem to slow down when it goes through glass or water or anything else? We're going to unpack Feynman's electrodynamic answer.
Yeah, it's a great question because it forces you to confront that core principle.
Yeah.
Light only travels at $2 in vacuum. So if it looks slower in glass...
Something else must be going on. It's not the photons hitting the brakes.
Precisely. It has to be about interaction.
Hmm.
And Feynman frames it using the principle of superposition. The total electric field, E-dolls anywhere, is just the sum of fields from all charges everywhere.
Which sounds impossibly complicated.
It does, but for, say, a light wave hitting glass, you can simplify. You've got the field from your source, SE bell, and then you've got the field produced by all the charges inside the glass itself. Let's call it N text
So the field inside the glass, or even after it, isn't just as it's S plus this text.
Exactly. S plus E text mat. That's the total field.
Okay, that's a huge shift in perspective. The glass isn't just blocking the light, it's actively contributing its own field.
It's an active participant.
So, how does this combination make the light appear slower if the underlying waves are still propagating at CLers?
It all comes down to interference, but specifically delayed interference. Let's visualize it like Feynman does with his figure 31 to hell. You have a source S, the glass plate, and a point P where you observe.
Okay, got it. S is the wave coming from S.
Right. Now, when that electric field S doll hits the electrons in the glass atoms, well, it pushes and pulls on them. It forces them to oscillate.
And oscillating charges radiate.
Exactly. So these jiggling electrons become tiny antennas, radiating their own secondary field, a life text mat, and this field goes out in all directions.
Okay, so at point P, after the plate, you're seeing the original SSL that went through, plus all these little egg text bits coming from the electrons inside the glass.
Precisely. And here's the crucial part. The electrons don't respond instantly. There's a tiny delay in their oscillation and re-radiation compared to when the LO wave front hits them.
Ah, delay.
Yes. So when you add LOAs and the slightly delayed LO text together, the peaks and troughs of the combined wave, the total at Eller, they get shifted backward in phase.
So the wave crests arrive a little later than they would have if they'd just traveled through vacuum. The overall pattern is delayed.
That's it exactly. The wave pattern, the phase, appears to travel slower. It exits the glass thickness, delta Z, with a phase shift that makes it look like it took longer.
How much longer?
Well, instead of taking time delta ZCO, the phase delay makes it equivalent to a travel time of delta ZCO. And that factor, no dollar, that's the index of refraction. It's just a measure of this phase lag accumulated through the material.
Okay, that clicks. The slowing down is an illusion, an effect of this interference pattern. It's not the fundamental speed changing.
Right. It's an effective speed, $40.
So to actually calculate dollars for, say, glass, we need to figure out the details of texta. How strongly do the electrons oscillate, and what's their phase lag?
Exactly. And this is where Feynman introduces a beautifully simple yet powerful model, the linear harmonic oscillator model.
The old mass on a spring analogy.
Pretty much. We pretend each electron involved is like a tiny mass held by a spring and has a natural frequency it likes to vibrate at to make it dollars.
Okay. And the incoming light wave, Asia, provides the driving force, Fadis cura Asia, trying to push this mass back and forth.
Right. So you write down the equation of motion, Newton's second law, basically. You've got mass times acceleration, the restoring force from the spring, which depends on omega dollars, and the driving force from the light wave.
That's equation 31, tall 11 in the text. md2 xdt2 plus omega 02 x equals phi.
And when you solve this equation for the electron's displacement, $6, you find something really important.
What's that?
The size of the electron's oscillation, how far it moves, depends critically on how the driving frequency, omega, compares to its natural frequency, megahertz. Exactly. The solution, equation 31.16, shows $6 is proportional to the driving field S-Dale, but it's inversely proportional to omega dollar.
So if the light's frequency omegas is very different from the electron's natural frequency omega dollar, that denominator is large, and $6 is small, the electron barely wiggles.
Right. But if the mega gets close to omega...
Uh-oh. That denominator gets tiny, and $6 gets huge. The electron oscillates wildly.
Precisely. And since the strength and phase of the radiated field depend directly on this oscillation's sigma-mollars, this frequency dependence is key.
So we combine the expression for Gitex mat, which depends on 6 mat, with the solution for 6 mat, which depends on wega and omega dollars, add it to Pex mat, figure out the phase shift.
And out pops the formula for $1 equation $31.19. It ends up being $1 is under 1 plus some term.
Right. $1 is 1 plus the complex fraction, and that fraction depends on things like $9, the number of atoms per unit volume, the electron charge squared, Q22, and crucially, that frequency term, $1, omega do omega dollar.
And this immediately explains a really common phenomenon, dispersion.
Because 9 clearly depends on the frequency of omega to the light.
Yep, different colors of light have different frequencies.
So blue light has a higher frequency than red light. Looking at the formula, generally omega to dollars is higher than visible light frequencies. So as omega increases, going from red to blue, the denominator omega 2 gets a bit smaller.
Meaning dollar gets a bit larger.
So Nuttall's is higher for blue than for red, which is exactly why a prism splits white light. It bends the blue light more.
Perfect. The model explains dispersion beautifully, but it also highlights that resonance problem we touched on.
Right. What happens when omega equals omega dollars? The formula blows up. Another goes to infinity.
Which, as you said, is unphysical. Materials don't have an infinite refractive index. They might become opaque, but infinity, no.
So this simple harmonic oscillator model, just the spring, isn't quite enough near resonance. Something's missing.
Energy loss, damping, friction. The real electron isn't oscillating in a vacuum. It's bumping into things. It's radiating energy away. We need to account for that energy dissipation.
Okay, so how do we add friction to the model?
We add a damping term to the equation of motion, proportional to the velocity. Let's represent the strength of this damping with a factor, say, gamma.
Right, section 31-4 covers this, so the equation gets a bit more complicated.
A little bit, but when you solve it and recalculate Nollers, something fascinating happens. Nollers is no longer just a real number.
It becomes complex.
Exactly. It takes the form of $1 equals an Ibre, a complex index of refraction.
Okay, wait. What does an imaginary part of the refractive index mean physically?
Great question. The real part in dollar behaves like our old dollars. It determines the phase velocity, the bending of light, the dispersion.
Okay, and the imaginary part?
That part is called the absorption index, or sometimes the extinction coefficient. It governs how the amplitude of the light wave decreases as it travels through the material.
Ah, so it represents the light being absorbed, turned into heat, or other energy.
Precisely. If a delay is large, the wave's amplitude drops off very quickly. The material is opaque. If the Noller is small or zero, the material is transparent at that frequency.
So this happens near resonance. When omegas is close to omega dollars, the damping term becomes significant, Nia gets large, and the material absorbs strongly.
That's generally the case, yes. It explains why materials are transparent to some frequencies, like glass to visible light, where omega is far from omega, but opaque to others, like UV or infrared for glass, where omega might be closer to some resonant frequencies.
And this ties into energy conservation too, right? Section 31-5.
It does. You can calculate the work done by the driving field S-spall on the damped oscillator electron. That work represents energy transferred to the material. And it turns out the rate of energy absorption is directly proportional to that imaginary part and the damping factor, gamma. It all fits together. The energy lost by the wave is exactly accounted for by the work done on the electrons.
Wow. Okay, so this whole picture superposition, oscillators, delayed response, complex index, explains refraction, dispersion, and absorption. That's pretty comprehensive.
It is. And Feynman takes it one step further, showing how the same core idea, AS plus E texmat, also underlies diffraction.
Diffraction, that seems different. How does scattering from electrons relate to light bending around corners?
Think about an opaque screen like in figure 31-6. Why is the field 0 behind it?
Because the screen blocks the light.
But how does it block it? In this framework, the incoming field, S sets, hits the screen. The charges in the screen material oscillate and produce their own field, E text opaque screen.
Okay.
And for an opaque screen, that generated field E text opaque screen must perfectly cancel A dust behind the screen. That's why it's opaque. E text plus E text opaque screen.
Whoa. So the screen isn't passive. It's actively generating a canceling field.
Exactly. Now, what if you cut a hole in the screen?
Well, the light gets through the hole.
Right. But think about the fields. You had AE plus E text opaque screen. Now you remove a piece of the screen, the plug. The field from the remaining screen is e-textopic screen text.
Okay.
The field behind the hole is now EEES plus e-textopic screen
Right.
text. But we know that e-textopic screen text plus e-text plug, where e-text plug is the field the plug would have created. Since the original total field was 0, AUZ plus e-text bro with hole dollars with hole, therefore the field that gets through the hole, ES plus e-text brodol, must be equal to e-text plug.
The field behind the hole is the negative of the field that the material removed from the hole would have produced on its own.
Exactly. This is equation 31, AP. It shows that the diffraction pattern is determined by the radiation that would have come from the sources removed from the opening.
That connects directly to Huygens' principle, doesn't it? The idea that points in the opening act as new sources.
It grounds Huygens' principle in the underlying electrodynamics of charges responding to fields. It's not just a convenient mathematical trick. It arises from the same physics as refraction.
That's really elegant. So wrapping this up for the listener, the big takeaway is light doesn't really slow down inside materials.
Nope. The apparent slowing, the refractive index, non-dollars, it's an emergent phenomenon. It's the result of the original light wave interfering with the secondary waves radiated by the oscillating electrons in the material, waves which are slightly delayed.
It's a collective effect, a phase shift disguised as a velocity change.
Precisely. And the key tools Feynman gives us are this superposition principle, Fe plus E textmat, the simple but effective harmonic oscillator model for the electrons.
Which naturally leads to dispersion, the frequency dependence of $9.
And then adding damping to that model gives us the complex index, $1 ANE9, explaining absorption via the imaginary part, $none, and it even connects to diffraction.
Amazing. Now, one last thing. You mentioned near resonance. The math gets tricky. The text notes that the phase velocity, $, can actually exceed $, in some frequency ranges near resonance, where $none dips below 1 ton.
Yes. That's a curious point.
It raises a potentially alarming question.
Yeah.
If VIN can be greater than $, does that mean we can send signals faster than light?
Right. That's the immediate thought. But the analysis, sticking strictly to Feynman here, says no.
Why not?
Because the phase velocity describes the speed of a single infinite wave train's crests. To send a signal, you need to modulate the wave, create a pulse, a beginning, and an end. That pulse, the actual information, travels at what's called the group velocity.
And the group's velocity.
Even in these anomalous dispersion regions, the group velocity, which represents the speed of energy and information transfer, does not exceed singulars. So Einstein is safe. Phase velocity can exceed signal dollars, but signal velocity cannot. That's a deeper topic involving wave packets.
Okay, something for our listeners to ponder further. Phase velocity versus group velocity. Got it.
It shows how careful you have to be with interpreting these wave phenomena.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, this has been a fantastic deep dive into a really fundamental piece of physics. Thanks for walking us through Feynman's insights.
My pleasure. It's always great to revisit these lectures.
And thank you, the listener, for sharing this source material with us. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.